The message arrived just as I stepped out of a meeting in Berlin. I had been finalizing a multi-million euro partnership with a fintech firm, a deal that would position my company as a leader in European markets. My phone buzzed, and there it was. Subject: the house is sold. I froze in the marble lobby of the Friedrichstrasse building, my heart sinking. My name is Ava Harper. I'm 35, and for the past 11 years, I've built a discreet but powerful corporate restructuring firm based in Zurich. I've advised governments, rescued collapsing brands, and helped clients recover billions. But none of that mattered at that moment. The house they sold was supposed to be mine. "We got a strong offer, much better than that small down payment you put in," my mother's email read. "So we accepted. It's all signed. Done." I stood motionless, rereading the message. 5 years of mortgage payments, renovations, and insurance, I had covered it all. But the deed, my parents had insisted on keeping it in their name. "Just until you're more settled, sweetheart," they said. I was across the world, sealing the biggest deal of my career, and they had sold my home behind my back. I stepped into a quiet hallway and dialed my mother's number. It rang twice. "Oh, Ava," her voice burst out cheerfully. "Did you see our email? Isn't that great news?" "Mom," I said, struggling to keep my tone even. That was my house. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "Your father and I needed the liquidity. Barton and Co. hasn't been doing so well, and you're always flying all over Europe with that little advisory gig of yours." Little advisory gig. If only she knew the weight of the paperwork still sitting in my briefcase. If only she had seen the German minister shake my hand asking for my help restructuring their public pension funds. "Where exactly am I supposed to stay when I return?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Oh, you can stay here," she said. "Your old room is exactly the way you left it. It'll be just like when you were 17 again." As if that were a good thing. Back then, all I got were constant comparisons to my brother Ethan Brooks, their golden boy, now COO of the very company they admitted was sinking. I was told to be realistic, to marry well, and to let Ethan handle the family business. I had built everything without them, and they had taken from me anyway. "I have to go," I said, cutting the call short. I returned to the conference room where the deal awaited my signature. In 2 weeks, Barton and Co. would face a full-scale audit from a mysterious new consultancy brought in by their newest board member, the one who had just acquired their largest competitor, my firm. They had sold my house, but soon they would realize who they had sold it to. When they walked into their boardroom next quarter, nervously adjusting their suits, they would be looking across the table at their new boss. Sometimes revenge doesn't require a raised voice or a courtroom drama. Sometimes it's just a well-timed merger and a quiet seat at the head of the table. While my parents were busy selling my house to keep their crumbling logistics company afloat, I was in Berlin quietly orchestrating the most ambitious corporate acquisition of my career. Barton and Co., the company my parents built and worked for, wasn't just in trouble, it was in free fall. And I knew exactly why. For the past 18 months, using a network of shell corporations and carefully disguised holding firms, I had been buying up their debt bit by bit. Every overdue supplier invoice, every missed interest payment, they all quietly found their way to me. They thought I ran a boutique advisory firm out of Zurich. In truth, I was Ava Harper, CEO of Veritas Capital, one of Europe's most aggressive acquisition firms, specializing in distressed asset takeovers. We didn't just rescue companies, we restructured, dismantled, and absorbed them into something better or something more profitable. My phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. "Mom told you about the house. Sorry, sis, but business is business. Business is business." They had used that phrase to justify everything when they refused to co-sign my student loan, because Ethan needed seed funding, when they liquidated my childhood savings to cover a shortfall in payroll without telling me, and now when they sold the home I had paid for because the company came first. I replied with a simple "understood." Then I turned to Mason Carter, my Berlin legal partner. "Are the contracts finalized?" I asked in German, a language I had learned years ago while shadowing a turnaround in Frankfurt, another chapter of my life they knew nothing about. He smiled. "Everything is ready, Frau Harper. By Friday, you'll control 78% of Barton & Co." I signed the final documents with the calm certainty my family always mistook for passivity. It wasn't just a deal, it was a reckoning. In a few weeks, I would legally own controlling interest in Barton & Co., the very company they had sacrificed everything for, including me, including my home. "Book me a flight to London," I told my assistant. "It's time I paid my parents a visit." The following weeks blurred into executive briefings, internal audits, and asset valuations. I moved into a penthouse overlooking the Thames, ignoring every call from my mother and every desperate email from Ethan. Let them think I was licking my wounds over a house. Let them believe I was still the forgotten daughter off in Europe with her little firm. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The morning it all came together, I stood before the mirror in my suite. My tailored navy blazer was sharp, my hair pinned with quiet precision. The woman looking back wasn't the disappointment they dismissed. She was the storm they never saw coming. Briefcase in hand, filled with the final documents to cement my control, I headed to Barton & Co.'s London headquarters, the very building where my father once told me, "You'll never understand real business, Ava." As I walked through the revolving doors, a security guard gave me a polite nod. "Welcome back, Miss Harper." Funny how things change. He was already on Veritas Capital's payroll, just like several key executives in the company they still believed was theirs. The elevator ride to the top floor of Barton & Co.'s London headquarters felt like an eternity. Floor by floor, I replayed everything in my mind, the years they brushed me aside, the eye rolls when I mentioned business ideas, the lectures, the lies, the betrayal of selling my home. It had all led to this moment. When the doors opened, I stepped into the familiar hallway lined with portraits of the company's founders. My mother's laugh echoed from the boardroom light, forced anxious. They were already gathered, my parents and my brother Ethan, likely discussing the sudden, anonymous takeover. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer and walked forward. It was time for the real Ava Harper to be introduced. Just outside the boardroom, I paused. My father's voice rang out firm and frustrated. "This has to be a mistake. An unknown firm can't just sweep in and buy Barton & Co. We built this company from the ground up." "I've checked it 3 times," Ethan responded. "Veritas Capital owns 78% of our stock. They've absorbed most of our debt, too. We're legally obligated to meet their CEO today." My mother chimed in, "Well, I'm sure it's just paperwork. We've handled worse. We always land on our feet." That's when I opened the boardroom door. Every head turned. My father's face twisted with irritation. "Ava, this meeting is for board members only. Whatever tantrum you're having about the house can wait." I stepped forward, calm and deliberate. "Actually, I'm right on time." I set my leather briefcase on the table with a quiet click. "The CEO of Veritas Capital is scheduled to meet with you at 10 Outero." Ethan frowned, checking his watch. "Yes, but she's not—" "She is," I interrupted. I opened the briefcase and slid out the documentation. "I'm here. I'm the CEO of Veritas Capital." Silence. My mother's glass slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. My father's face turned chalk white. Ethan looked like he had seen a ghost. "That's not possible," he said. "You run a boutique consultancy. You can't be—" "Can't be what exactly?" I asked, tilting my head. "Competent, ambitious. Too much of a disappointment to outgrow your entire legacy." I laid the papers out on the table. "You'll find everything in order. Veritas Capital holds majority ownership of Barton & Co., including the controlling board seats. As of this morning, I am your superior." My father reached for the documents, his hands trembling. "This is some kind of joke." "No," I said calmly. "This is a lesson in what happens when you underestimate the wrong daughter, like the joke of selling my house without asking, or borrowing from my education fund without a word, or maybe the joke of calling me a failure while I was building a multinational acquisition firm under your noses." My father opened his mouth, but my mother beat him to it. "We needed that money for the company." "Right," I replied, my voice sharp but even. "To protect your legacy." I glanced around the room, then let out a short laugh. "Take a good look around, Mom. This isn't your legacy anymore. It's mine. Veritas Capital doesn't just rescue failing companies. We restructure. And Barton & Co., you've been bleeding it dry for years." "You can't do this," my father said, his voice cracking. "We're your parents." I met his eyes. Business is business, remember? I let the phrase hang in the air, the same phrase they had used to dismiss my needs my entire life. I turned to the board, several members clearly fighting back smirks. They had endured years under my family's arrogance and incompetence. Today, they were watching the tide turn. "As of today, we're making changes," I announced. "Ethan, you're being relieved of your role as COO effective immediately." His jaw dropped. "Dad, you're stepping down as CEO, and Mom, your position as head of communications is no longer required." "You're firing us," Ethan sputtered. "Your own family." I remembered the birthdays missed because they needed me to watch the phones, the vacations canceled when they asked for just a little help, the way they laughed at my first investment pitch like it was a school project. "No," I said, "I'm offering you what you gave me a chance to earn your place." I opened the personnel folder. Ethan, there's an opening in accounts receivable entry level. Dad, we need door-to-door sales reps for our new regional initiative. He looked physically ill. And Mom, the front desk, could use a receptionist with a warm smile and a good memory. Her hands flew to her face as she burst into tears. Or I continued tucking the folder away. You can clean out your desks by 5:00 p.m., your choice. You ungrateful, my father started. I held up a hand. Careful, I said. You're speaking to your boss now. I gathered my documents and turned to leave, but before I stepped through the door, I paused. Oh, about my house, the one you sold. They looked up sharply. I bought the development company that purchased it. The deed will be back in my name by tomorrow. The looks on their faces were the kind you can't buy, pure disbelief wrapped in poetic justice. After years of being dismissed, mocked, and written off, I had taken back everything they had stolen and more. I turned toward the board. Meeting resumes tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Be ready with your departmental updates. Then I looked over my shoulder directly at my family. For those of you still employed, that is. The rest of you can collect your personal belongings from security. I walked out with my head high and my power intact. No longer the invisible daughter, no longer underestimated. The echo of my heels against the marble floor was sharp and final. Behind me, I could hear the unraveling, my mother's muffled sobs, my father's furious shouting, and Ethan's stunned silence. But for the first time in 35 years, their noise didn't touch me. They couldn't reach me anymore. I had built something they never imagined I could, something they never wanted me to. Now, standing at the pinnacle of my own success, I had finally shown them exactly who I was, not the daughter they dismissed, but the force they never saw coming. My phone buzzed. A message from Mason Carter in Berlin. Glückwunsch, Frau Harper. How did it go? I smiled as I stepped into the executive elevator. Better than expected. Time to rebuild Barton & Co. my way. As the doors closed, I glanced once more at the company's logo, etched in brass. They had chosen that name, that building that image over me again and again. Now they could watch as I turned it into something far beyond anything they were capable of building. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's showing them exactly what they failed to see all along. I stepped out into the London breeze, the building now mine, a symbol of everything they tried to keep from me. The next morning, I settled into the leather chair in what used to be my father's office. The sunlight cut across the desk, illuminating my reflection in the glass behind it. My office now. I picked up the morning paper and laughed softly. The headline read, Veritas Capital acquires Barton & Co. CEO reveals identity in boardroom shakeup. Unknown CEO. If only they knew. If only they understood how long I had been building this moment, the years of study, of silence, of careful moves. The anonymity they mocked had been my greatest weapon. To them, I had just been the daughter with a little consultancy in Switzerland. But that's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you the perfect cover to strike when they're looking the other way. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hi, Sophie. Yes, I'd like to put a property on the market. Yes, the townhouse on Renhurst Lane, the one recently sold by the Brooks family. I paused. Oh, don't worry. I own it now. Bought the holding company last week. I leaned back, the line still open. Listed at market. No family discount. Sometimes karma shows up as a scandal, sometimes as a lawsuit, and sometimes she walks into your boardroom in heels, holding the deed to everything you once owned. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you couldn't, you know this feeling. This wasn't just about a company or a house. It was about reclaiming my voice, my worth, and everything they said I couldn't have. If you've ever been the one they doubted, dismissed, or called a disappointment, then maybe a part of my journey felt familiar to you. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever worked in silence, building something incredible while others only saw failure? Quiet strength is still strength, and you don't have to shout to be powerful. You just have to keep going. You don't owe anyone proof of your potential. You just owe it to yourself to become everything they said you couldn't. Work hard, move smart, be patient. Because the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the version of yourself they never thought possible. And when that moment comes, walk into the room like you own it. Because maybe, just maybe, you do.